Expectations are growing that Apple will make announcements related to generative AI at the Worldwide Developers Conference in June. What are your thoughts on the criticism that it's lagging behind in the AI race, with Samsung having unveiled its first AI phone in January?
You have to look at this on an application by application basis. Apple has certainly included some AI features in the operating system for some time. It supports translation, it supports transcription, it supports text to speech. What we really haven't seen that we've seen in some other devices are these kinds of video generation, text generation, magic editing kinds of features where you can remove background objects or distracting objects from photos or videos or enhance them in ways to make them a bit more interesting or dynamic. Those would be the kinds of features that Apple might want to consider for its use of generative AI on iOS. However, there are clearly fits in terms of Apple's application suite, for example, summarizing emails, reporting on calendar items, being able to summarize FaceTime calls. These would all be the kinds of applications that Apple might want to incorporate into the iPhone using generative AI, enhancing video capture, filling in gaps with generated videos. So there's certainly the opportunity, and it must be something that Apple is looking at. But at this time, there really aren't compelling applications that Apple is lacking, where consumers would be inclined to say, that generative AI application that I see on another device is so compelling that I'm going to choose that device over an iPhone. So there's still time to respond.
Apple's reportedly talking with several companies to cooperate on AI. Can you share your own outlook on how that may pan out?
The situation really comes down to where Apple is in AI and relative to competitors that have implemented certain AI technologies on their devices. There are a few things at play here. First off, Google developing its Gemini model, particularly version of it, Gemini Nano, that can operate locally on a smartphone. And Apple, unlike a number of these companies, hasn't really been promoting a large language model. There have been reports that it is working on one. Whether that would be ready for deployment or competitive in the time frame that Apple would want to release an operating system to support it would largely dictate what kind of partners it goes with, or really it wouldn't necessarily have to be a broadly promoted partnership. It could just be more of a licensing agreement that happened under the hood. One thing is clear, which is that AI is rapidly reshaping how consumers do search. So it may well have an impact on the search relationship and agreement that Apple has with Google, and Google would surely be lobbying Apple strongly to adopt Gemini if it were willing to accept a third-party large language model in its software, at least in the short term.
According to Bloomberg, Apple has abandoned its ambitions to develop the Apple Car, and it's exploring home robots as its next big thing. If this is true, how would you evaluate these efforts?
There were a number of challenges with the car initiative, according to reports. Most of them focused on the development of the vehicle and the decision as to whether to build a self-driving car or just an electric vehicle that had some self-driving capabilities. Even if Apple had gotten the product to market, it really would have represented a significant shift in terms of the kinds of products it sells, in terms of, for example, product life cycles. Most of Apple's products have a turnover of a couple of years, as opposed to, say, a vehicle that might be turned over or traded in after 7 years, maybe 10 years in some cases. So that's a far longer life cycle. You can't really demo a car in many of Apple's retail stores today. In the mall, they're far too small. You might be able to have one there as a demo piece if you were willing to clear out a lot of other shelf space, but you really wouldn't be able to drive it around. So that would largely likely require a new store network, as Tesla has built. We really haven't seen companies that are in significant businesses other than cars have a lot of success in the car business to date. So that certainly would have been an interesting phenomenon to watch. The home robot market could potentially be a better fit for Apple's distribution today, for the price points that they're typically looking at for the decision timeline. There really hasn't been much happening in this space beyond of course, vacuum robots, which have been with us for at least a decade, and what Amazon has been trying with the Astro, which is an interesting product that combines some movement throughout the home, some intelligent home mapping technology, but the interface of the things that it can do, other than say surveillance or presenting tablet type apps, is somewhat limited. So it could potentially be a good fit for Apple's vertical integration. There would have to be a lot of progress in terms of the capabilities of the device for it to be really a compelling breakthrough the way that the iPhone has been, and open up that kind of market potential.
So Apple is also facing regulatory challenges, namely the US Justice Department's antitrust lawsuit against the company and the EU's Digital Markets Act investigation. Do you see these developments having a material impact on Apple's business?
Well, we've already seen it have a material impact on Apple's products, particularly the Digital Markets Act. Apple made several changes to its operating system in order to comply with the requirements of the act. And if the DOJ were to prevail in its lawsuit, Apple might have to make similar changes or modifications to the way the iPhone works in North America, or at least the United States, to come into compliance with whatever court findings were established. So that might include, for example, based on the complaint, allowing additional app stores or allowing access to additional APIs for other smartwatch makers to bring over their devices to make them iPhone compatible. It might also include changes to iMessage to allow greater compatibility between that system and other messaging systems. Already, Apple has said that it will support the RCS standard to improve the state of messaging between the iPhone and Android, but there may be further changes. In terms of impact on the business, in the short term, there probably wouldn't be many changes, but in the long term, a lot of Apple's services revenue is incumbent upon them being able to have a degree of control over what is on their platform. They've launched many different services on their platform. And if they were forced to accommodate competitors more aggressively, that might limit the growth of that service revenue.
Apple's service segment has been growing while revenue from its hardware products has been declining. So how significant would you say the service segment is for Apple as a whole?
Well, as you mentioned, it's really a growing segment, and over time, it should encompass a larger share of Apple's revenue. Really, there is no obvious new champion device that is going to displace the smartphone. So that is going to remain the champion consumer device. And of course, as it matures, it becomes more of a replacement market. It's very difficult to grow revenue there without infringing more on the Android market, which would require lower priced products. Apple is loath to enter those markets. It really plays well in the premium smartphone segment. So there's not a lot of market share room for growth, particularly in the United States, where its share is already high. And we don't have a number of the competitors that have significant share in Europe, the Chinese vendors such as Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, primarily. So the services story for Apple is one that is really just starting out. It is just really dipping its toe in financial services. There are major opportunities for it, for example, in healthcare, many other verticals that it could enter and potentially streamline through the use of its platforms.
Can you share your thoughts on Apple's long-term prospects with the multiple headwinds it currently faces?
The iPhone continues to be a very successful product. I mentioned earlier that in general, we have been seeing some slowdowns in smartphone growth as we have seen saturation, but it remains key to Apple's revenue and the centerpiece of its ecosystem. And there really doesn't seem to be anything in the immediate offering thing that is set to replace it from Apple or really anyone else on the horizon. So Apple recently released the Vision Pro, which is a new platform, a really new take on spatial computing, a very capable device that can accommodate a large number of tasks. But the history of these short history of these augmented reality headsets has been focused primarily on enterprise applications because that is where the ROI is easier to justify. Certainly, prices will come down on that product, and we may see non-pro versions of it selling for significantly less. The opportunity for Apple is to really bridge what has been primarily a games platform in VR to a broader computing platform that can at least start to take on more entertainment and productivity functions. But as that story develops, we're going to continue to see Apple make improvements in camera, in display, in the software experience around the ecosystem. Although, again, some of that will be contingent upon how things go with the DOJ actions and other litigation and legislation.